Which one of the following statements, if false, could be seen as supporting the arguments in the passage? We have to first understand the question. This is a very twisted kind of a question. It's a classic curveball. Which one of the following statements, if false, could be seen as supporting the argument of the passage? So, if any of these options were to be false, then they would support the argument of the passage, which means that the option itself would have to be an argument which weakens the arguments made in the passage. Only then, if it becomes false, then the argument of the passage is supported or strengthened. So, in a generalization, we have to find something which weakens or goes against the arguments made in the passage. Let's check with the options. One states, an understanding of grammar helps a writer decide if she or he is writing well or not. This is true according to the passage. We can see it here in the last line of the third paragraph. Yet he goes on to add this thought, which I urge you to consider. Unless he is certain of doing well, the writer will probably do best to follow the rules. So, whether the writer is writing well or not, doing well or not, that is something which is an outcome of an understanding of grammar. So this is in line with, this supports the passage. If it were false, then the passage would be weakened. So we understand how this cannot be a valid answer for us. So one can be eliminated. Option 2 states, it has been observed that writers sometimes disregard the rules of rhetoric. This is close to the reference we were just now looking at. Even William Strunk, that Mussolini of rhetoric, recognized the delicious pliability of language. It is an old observation, he writes, that the best writers sometimes disregard the rules of rhetoric. Again, this is true according to the passage, so we cannot have this as an answer. 2 is eliminated. Option 3 states, perish the thought that complete sentences necessarily need nouns and verbs. Now, this is incorrect. We have this factor that complete sentences necessarily need nouns and verbs. This is given in the passage, almost a direct reference. We can see it here. Nouns and verbs are two indispensable parts of writing. Without one of each, no group of words can be a sentence, since a sentence is by definition a group of words containing a subject, noun, and a predicate, verb. But this option says perish the thought. Perish the thought means dispel that thought, remove it from your head, completely give up its rubbish. Not true. This is true according to the passage. If we add the perish the thought, that means that this does not happen. This cannot be agreed to, this cannot be accepted, which means that this option overall weakens the argument. If it were false, then the argument of the passage would be strengthened. So 3 is perfectly valid as an answer. We can qualify 3. Option 4 states, regarding grammar, women artists tend to be more attentive to method and accuracy. Now, the difficulty here is that women artists or women writers have not been mentioned in the passage. There's no reference to them. So we find that this might or might not weaken, because we don't know the impact of women writers. So we don't know if this is true or false. We don't know if this is in line or supporting of the passage or weakening of the passage. So if this were false, then would it weaken or support respectively the passage, the arguments made in the passage? We cannot be sure of that. So 4 is ambiguous, cannot be said, outside the premise, hence 4 can be eliminated. Our answer is option 3. Inferring from the passage, the author could be most supportive of which one of the following practices? Which of the following practices would the author be supportive of? Option 1 states, a creative writing course that focuses on how to avoid the use of rhetoric. There's no need for this. There are at all 2 references to rhetoric in the passage. One is here in the third paragraph, and the second is here in the 5th paragraph. In both cases, we can read these lines and we'll find that rhetoric is not presented in a negative light. It is only stated in the third paragraph that the best writers sometimes disregard the rules of rhetoric. So then also you can follow when you fear getting lost in the tangles of rhetoric. Yes, so rhetoric is difficult, it's tangled, but not necessarily negative. So avoiding the use of rhetoric is not something that the author would necessarily support. The author supports avoiding the use of rhetoric by use of simple sentences. Rocks explode, Jane transmits, mountains float, plums deify, and such, only when the writer of these lines would fear getting lost in the tangle of rhetoric, getting lost in too much of difficult linguistic rules or grammatical rules. In that case, the author says, by all means, go ahead and use simple language. So this is not something that the author would necessarily be supportive of. We can eliminate option one. Option 2 states a campaign demanding that a writer's creative license should allow the breaking of grammatical rules. Why at all do this? This is redundant. Demanding that a writer's creative license should be allowed the breaking of grammatical rules. But this already happens. William Strunk says, William Strunk, who himself is called the Mussolini of rhetoric, so is something of a grammar Nazi. It is stated that it is an old observation, he writes, that the best writers sometimes disregard the rules of rhetoric. So it is already done. There's no need to campaign demanding that this is done. This is already done. So this option is redundant. There's no need for the author to support it. So two can be eliminated. Option 3 states the availability of language software that will standardize the rules of grammar as an aid to writers. This actually is perfect. We can see the reference here when William Strunk himself goes on to say, unless he is certain of doing well, the writer will probably do best to follow the rules. The telling clause here is unless he is certain of doing well. If you don't have a rudimentary grasp of how the parts of speech translate into coherent sentences, how can you be certain that you are doing well? How will you know if you are doing ill for that matter? The answer, of course, is that you can't, you won't. So if this can be remedied by use of software, language software, availability of language software that will standardize the rules of grammar as an aid to writers. Then writers would be able to break the rules as and when they see fit to tell a good story, to tell a compelling story, to make their language more compelling. Because otherwise, it would be impossible for them to know if they are writing well or they are not. So we find that this is something that the author should most certainly be supportive of. We can qualify 3 as a valid answer. Option 4 states the critique of standardized rules of punctuation and capitalization. Again, such a critique is not necessary. Standardized rules of punctuation and capitalization are already fixed, they are already standardized. We can see here nouns and verbs are two indispensable parts of writing. If we skip this forward, then we see words containing a subject noun and a predicate verb. These strings of words begin with a capital letter or a capitalization, end with a period or punctuation. So capitalization and punctuation are already within the rules. There is no need, they're established rules. There's no need to critique the standard rules regarding them. The author is in support of grammar. So the author would not critique or analyze a well established rule of grammar. So there's absolutely no reason to say that the author would be supportive of this particular activity. 4 can be eliminated. Our answer is option 3. Which one of the following quotes best captures the main concern of the passage? Option A states, bad grammar produces bad sentences. This is perfect. The reference is here, and we can see that grammar, rules of grammar, and misuse of grammar is basically the key aspect, the central theme of the passage. So, bad grammar produces bad sentences. That could very well be suggestive of that central theme or the main concern of the passage. So, one can be qualified as a valid answer. 2 states, Strunk and White caution against too many simple sentences in a row, but simple sentences provide a path you can follow when you fear getting lost in the tangles of rhetoric. This is a reference from the last paragraph, fifth paragraph here. Strunk and White caution against too many simple sentences in a row, but simple sentences provide a path you can follow when you fear getting lost in a tangle of rhetoric. Now, this clearly is not the main argument. The main argument is the use of grammar, bad grammar, so incorrect use of grammar. We see here that if there is fear of getting lost in the rules of rhetoric, then simple sentences can be used in place of rhetorical language, while although Strunk and White caution against using too many simple sentences. The key aspects here are difficulty of rhetoric or perceived difficulty of rhetoric or use of simple sentences. But that is a subset of the larger aspect of bad grammar or writing bad language. So one is clearly more significant than option two. Option two, in comparison, can be eliminated. Option 3 states nouns and verbs are two indispensable parts of writing. Without one of each, no group of words can be a sentence. This is from the second paragraph. We can see it here. These lines. What we have here is the structure of a sentence. What qualifies as a sentence? Nouns and verbs are mandatory, indispensable parts of writing or indispensable parts of a sentence because without one of each, no group of words can be a sentence. Again, this is not the central argument. The central argument is bad grammar, as we have already seen. So we can also eliminate this option. Option 3 is out. Option 4 states the telling clause here is unless he is certain of doing well. This is from here, the fourth paragraph, and we see the reference goes back to the third paragraph where William Strunk says, yet he goes on to add this thought, which I urge you to consider. Unless he is certain of doing well, the writer will probably do best to follow the rules. So the writer could, oftentimes it is seen that writers do disregard the rules of rhetoric, but if a writer is to write good language, unless a writer is to write good language, the writer has to make sure that he or she is following the rules. So this is about following rules, importance of following rules, but it's also about sometimes writers sometimes disregarding the rules. And let's not forget, these are rules of rhetoric. There is a side argument here. The primary argument is rules of grammar. The side argument is rhetoric. And in fact, the author gives a way out of rhetoric in the last paragraph. He says that if you are sure that you're going to make mistakes, you'll get lost in rhetoric, you'll as it is given here, you are not doing well, if you're doing ill, then you can go for simple sentences. Although the experts of language, say for example Strunk and White, they caution against too many simple sentences in a row, but you can use them if you want a way out of rhetoric, if you want to escape rhetoric, or if you are scared by rhetoric. So again, four is four is an important argument, but it's still a subset of the argument made in one. So four can be eliminated. Our answer clearly is option one. Take any noun, put it with any verb, and you have a sentence. It never fails. Rocks explode, Jane transmits, mountains float. None of the following statements can be seen as similar except. So we have to find a statement which is similar to this assertion. The assertion is here at the beginning of the last paragraph. So what we see here is if we analyze it a little and then compare with the argument made in the given options, then this should not be too difficult for us to answer. Take any noun, keyword any, put it with any verb, keyword any, and you have a sentence. So any noun plus any verb equals a sentence. It never fails. Rocks explode, Jane transmits, mountains float, and such. So what we are looking for is this particular relation. Let's check with the options. Option 1 states a collection of people with the same sports equipment is a sports team. Qualify any people with the same equipment equals a sports team. Wrong. Any people parallels any noun, but the same sport equipment does not parallel any verb. With any equipment would make a sports team. That would have been close, not this. So this is a distortion of the assessment. It's not a parallel. One can be eliminated. Option 2 states a group of nouns arranged in a row becomes a sentence. Again, not the answer that we are seeking, that we seek. A group of nouns. So that has only nouns. Arranged in a row becomes a sentence, does not have verbs. And this is a cardinal error. Nouns and verbs are two indispensable parts of writing. Without one of each, no group of words can be a sentence. So this does not make sense at all. It is not a parallel. In fact, it is against the information given in the passage. It is wrong in light of the passage. So two can be eliminated. Option 3 states take an apple tree, plant it in a field, and you have an orchard. This is still incorrect. Take an apple tree, wrong. What would have worked here is take any tree, plant it in any field, and you would have an orchard. But an apple tree is specific, does not correlate with, does not parallel any noun. So we can eliminate option 3 as well. Option 4 states take any vegetable, put some spices in it, and you have a dish. This is close enough. We have any vegetable, put some spices. It doesn't say which spices, any spices. Here, at least in this context, we can remove this some and replace it with any. So any vegetables plus any spices equals a dish. So this closest parallels this particular statement. We can qualify 4 as a valid answer. Hence, our answer is option 4. All of the following statements can be inferred from the passage, except that. So, finally, a straightforward which of the following inferences is incorrect kind of a question. Let's check with the options. Option 1 states sentences do not always have to be complete. This is true, this can be inferred. While the second paragraph harps on about what is exactly a complete sentence, the third paragraph starts by saying, must you write complete sentences each time, every time? Perish the thought. If your work consists only of fragments and floating clauses, the grammar police aren't going to come and take you away. Even William Strunk, that Mussolini of rhetoric, that grammar Nazi of rhetoric, recognized the delicious pliable of language. The best writers sometimes disregard the rules of rhetoric. So this is true according to the passage. We can eliminate option 1. Option 2 states the primary purpose of grammar is to ensure that sentences remain simple. This is incorrect. This we cannot infer. There's a there's an exaggeration in this. This is not the primary purpose. We can see here simplicity can be achieved through simple sentences. Take any noun, put it with any verb, and you have a sentence. It never fails. Rocks explode, Jane transmits, mountains float. These are all perfect sentences. Many such thoughts make little rational sense. But even the stranger ones, plums deify, have a kind of poetic weight that's nice. The simplicity of noun verb construction is useful. At the very least, it can provide a safety net for your writing. As in, these can, but simple sentences provide a path you can follow when you fear getting lost in the tangle of rhetoric. But that does not mean that the primary purpose of grammar is to ensure that sentences remain simple. There is rhetoric, it is going to be complex. Yes, we see here without one of each, no group of words. So, group of words can be as long and as complex as possible. You just need one of each of these to make it a complete sentence. So we see that this is definitely a distortion. This is an exaggeration. 2 is not correct, cannot be inferred from the passage. So we can qualify 2 as a valid answer. Option 3 states the subject predicate relation is the same as the noun verb relation. Exactly that. Nouns and verbs are two indispensable parts of writing. And by definition, since a sentence is by definition a group of words containing a subject, noun, and a predicate verb, these string of words begin with a capital letter and so on. So we realize that this is also true. We can eliminate option 3. So 3 is out. Option 4 states grammar police is a metaphor for critics who focus on linguistic rules. Most certainly, there's no such thing as grammar police. What the author is doing here is trying out a bit of humor. Must you write complete sentences every time, each time, every time? Perish the thought. Put it out of your mind. If your work consists only of fragments and floating clauses, nobody is going to arrest you for flouting the rules of grammar. The grammar police aren't going to come and take you away. The very next statement, even William Strunk, that Mussolini of rhetoric, recognized the delicious pliability of language. So it makes sense that what we are talking about here are critics who focus on linguistic rules, who enforce linguistic rules. So grammar police is metaphorical for such critics who are excessively fussy about language and linguistic rules. So, this is also true according to the passage. We can eliminate option 4. Our answer is answer option